Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. Prepare to feel inspired and better equipped to navigate your career path. I am Alexandra Chabotaru, your host, and together with my guests, we will tackle a new field of work in each episode. The aim of this podcast is to deep dive into career perspectives and strategies to navigate your desired path for success. Enjoy! Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of FemLead. This is a special episode. As you can all see, I am here with Nima Tisdall in person. We are in Spaces in Copenhagen, and we've decided to meet in person because we had the setup for actually having this interview together. We work together on With Purpose, a project with the Global Shapers community here in Copenhagen. And we've decided that since we wanted to do this interview, we could meet face-to-face and follow all the guidelines and actually do the interview in person. Yeah. When I started this podcast, I would not think I will be able to do this. So I'm also very excited. We have very a low gear here. So if you think that, there are things that could be improved, you're probably right. But we are here in a conference room and it's really fun. And we've been planning this to give more understanding on social entrepreneurship, Nima's journey, and some exciting news on her path. So thank you so much, Nima, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's so nice.
You are a very accomplished entrepreneur. You're very young. You've just been nominated for Forbes 30 under 30 list. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
And you also met Obama.
Yes. Yeah.
The former president in person.
Yes.
I mean, online, but through a... Yeah.
As in person as it is in COVID times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you are one of the... in 2020, you became the European Laureate for the Obama Foundation Leaders Program.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. How was that?
That was really cool. So it was the first time they did a European version of it, and they basically bring together change makers across the continent. We're a couple 20 from across Europe, and usually it's like a physical meetup, but we actually had several months where we all got to create a network together and hear about each other's projects and hopefully build some leadership skills. So that was really cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, you posted about it. I saw the picture and I couldn't believe that in the middle there it was Barack Obama, and you were one of the attendees for that special webinar. I guess it was really a great setup to be in. Congrats. That's really amazing. Yeah. Today you are here as an entrepreneur and founder. You founded Blue Lobster.
Yes.
And I'm going to read what Blue Lobster does exactly so that I do not share something that's not true. So hear me out here. A platform for sustainable fishermen to sell their catches at a fair price. The aim is to revert the fishing industry towards low impact practices by making sustainable fishing the economically viable choice. You build this business from the desire to change the world for the better. That's true. You inspire many young women and many young entrepreneurs in general to go for it, try out. You went to Venture Cup, correct?
That's right.
Here in Copenhagen, in Denmark. Yeah. And, you've been through different programs where you were able to take this project further. But in order to make more or less a understanding of what Blue Lobster is doing and what the setup is, can you tell us what the company does today? How many people do you employ? How does a normal day-to-day look for you? Sure. What is it that you do today?
Yeah, of course. So every day looks different, right? Because that's what startup is like. But we are 9 people now on the team. We have a platform that facilitates mostly sales from fishermen close to Copenhagen into restaurants and canteens. So COVID has been kind of hard. Because of that, we made a slight pivot in December, pretty big pivot actually, to private consumers. So we started, that meant we needed to have more hands-on things than we had before. Before, we wanted to be purely transactional, where you had a platform. The fisherman stands on his boat, he types in what he has that day, and then we basically pick it up and drop it off at the restaurants. But now we actually had to bring it into a facility. We had to pack it because private consumers can't buy big boxes at a time. So it's created us to become a little more hands-on. But it's actually really exciting because now we have our operations team and our software development team together in the meatpacking district in Copenhagen. We just moved in last week and we're super excited about that. So usually the day starts with lots of operations. The fishing industry starts early. So we've gotten, so that's kind of like the morning processes until around 10. Then the whole team comes together, talks about what they're going to do that day. And then, what do we do after that? It depends on the day, right? Depends on the day. So I think our focus right now is how we leverage the technology that we have built to tackle some of the more complex issues in the industry. So rather, right now we can kind of facilitate a direct transaction, which means that we cut out typically 4 to 5 middlemen, and therefore the fisherman gets a much better price, and we can encourage fishermen to use sustainable practices by paying them a better price, right? But we think we can take it a step further with some more technological improvements to the system. Yeah.
That must have been very exciting to digitalize a industry where, you know, the fisherman himself or herself didn't have the means to communicate with businesses or consumers directly.
Right.
How was that in terms of challenges?
Yeah, so I think the first challenge is if you're digitalizing something that hasn't been digitalized before, right? We're coming down to a scenario where the fishermen are typically writing in hand what they've caught. And that's still the practice today in Denmark. So now we have to get them to take a smartphone in their hand and press things there. Actually, it's the same with the chefs. The chefs are typically calling up their fishmongers. You know, they're calling them up saying at the end of a shift going, okay, I'm missing like 50 kilos of this, 30 kilos of this, but to get them to go into a marketplace, look what's actually there. And then choose from that. That you need some kind of adoption of technology, and that's difficult, right? But I think the cool thing about it's not the technology we built so far is not necessarily that advanced, but as you said, what we're doing in my mind is like democratizing networks, because the great thing about very simple technology is that you get to people can meet each other, right? People that maybe didn't have a way of connecting before can now connect with each other. So there no longer necessarily is a need for lots of people to facilitate a sale if the supplier and the final buyer can actually talk together. And I think that applies to many industries. Yeah.
And when it comes to some of the feedback you initially got, because you had to do a lot of user research and go and talk to fishermen, tell them about the idea, have them on board. Tell us, how did you start? Because I think the audience that we are today focusing on with this interview are also people that may have an idea and they might not know where to start or how to go around building some sort of network or some sort of understanding about where their idea can take them. How did you do it?
So the first thing you need to do is probably just talk to people. And it is sometimes the most nerve-wracking because talking to people can be so hard. Like it really can, right? So the first thing we did was we went down to a harbor and started literally just knocking on boats and saying like, hey, are you here? Who do you sell to? How does your supply chain work? What are you happy with? What are you sad with? And we didn't come with any pitch. Like we just asked them questions. And then afterwards we went to restaurants and did the same. And from then we started saying, okay, we can start mapping out the issues that exist. We had a basic idea of where we wanted to go. We wanted to create some kind of like we knew we wanted to help out the fishermen. We knew we wanted to get fish to consumers quicker. That was actually our initial goal. But we kind of had a vague idea there's something here, right? And that was mostly based on our gut feeling and the fact that my co-founder Christine couldn't find fresh fish in Copenhagen. But going out and not taking your assumptions with you yet, and just talking to people, just talking to who you think are your potential customers, and soaking it in. And it always feels too early. Like I talk to people who are trying to start up all the time and they're like, but I don't have my idea yet. I don't have anything to bring them. I don't have anything to show them. But that's actually the point. You want to come in pretty vague and just ask a bunch of open-ended questions, and not like, you know, I think you're taught to do interview guides as well, where you come in with like 5 specific questions. That can be good, but my genuine preference is to ask really open-ended questions and just let people blab. The more you can just like have people talk, the better, because they're going to tell you things in between the lines that will be worth gold, right? And you didn't know to ask because if you already knew what their problem was, you wouldn't be asking. Right?
How did you decide to go into this space though?
Well, so my co-founder Christine, as I said, she's from the US. So she came to Denmark with some imagination that this was going to be the fish capital of paradise. Exactly. And then she came and she was like super disappointed with the variety of fish, but like the selection of fish in the supermarkets. It was old and it was expensive, and she just didn't get it. So she came to me and she was like, you know, you're Danish, like why there's coast everywhere, I can see the sea from my university, why can't I buy fresh fish? And I didn't have a good answer. So we just started looking. And then we were like, okay, it just turned out that there's this huge mismatch between the fact that fish was being picked up right around Copenhagen, driven really far away to get sold at an auction, and then driven back again. And that supply chain just didn't make any sense. It was quite simple actually then that we could do something better than the system. But it started off with just like a consumer annoyance that there wasn't good selection.
You challenged a lot of established companies in this sector.
Yes.
What was the feedback that you've gotten when they found out you exist and when you started becoming more and more popular?
Right. Oh my God. Well, yeah. So I would say the word disruption gets thrown around loads, right? But I think we are generally going in and really, really changing the supply chain of an industry that hasn't changed in a long time. We are, as you say, challenging a lot of norms. We're challenging the necessity for as many middlemen as there exists. We're challenging the most of the processes. Actually, we came in wanting to find better solutions. So every single step of the way, we challenge stuff. Sometimes we figured out we were like trying to invent the wheel when the wheel actually worked fine. But overall, we've taken an entire supply chain, broken it up, and then made something that we believe is a lot more effective. So, of course, some people are going to be pissed because that means that we're going in and challenging their established businesses. And they're earning good money. There's no reason for them to want to change. And I think the initial reaction was just like, oh, well, these are just like some young schoolgirls, just whatever, let them do their project. I think people thought we were going to be an NGO or something, because we came out with all these great intentions about helping the fishermen, saving the ocean environment, like all these things. So people just assumed we would be nonprofit, right? So we got written off for probably the first year or something. We were out there asking questions. I also think people told us lots of stuff because when we came down, they were like open books, right? Like they really assumed we couldn't do anything with the information that they were giving us. And I mean that literally. They thought we probably didn't have the competencies to run a project like the one we're doing now. Then as we start taking form and as we start winning customers, because it was very clear from day one, the first customer we tried to get, we got. And after that, we were able to win lots of customers, restaurants, that is, really, really quickly, because we came out in with a produce that was caught on the same day. And those chefs typically don't see fish that is caught until 3 days afterwards. Wow. So there was like a initial, like immediate quality assurance, right? Like they were like, there's an improvement here. And we were actually able to win customers really, really quickly. And then obviously the industry started taking notice, right? Because we were filling a gap that was there. And then I would say that there is last 2020 was filled with from about summer and onwards, lots of kind of crazy experiences, because we started getting real pushback from industry players, not just competitors in the wholesale market, but at basically every level of the fishing industry, gatekeepers who want to keep this industry closed, I think. And everything from like threats to like fish going missing. Our fish was taken from harbors. We found our boxes smashed up. Like there are crazy things that happen both. And then and direct exclusion, right? People who were going around telling our suppliers they shouldn't work with us. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to work with anyone else. So this kind of like threatening behavior really started to dominate everything we did. And that was difficult to navigate, right? Because we don't want to put we're there for the fishermen. So if we're putting our fishermen in a difficult situation, well, that sucks, right?
And what did you do then? What happened in the last year, let's say?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, we decided the best way to to get through it was to keep going, right? Like just to keep growing, keep focused on what we were doing. The fishermen, our fishermen, the suppliers, they were super cool. They told everyone to basically fuck off. Like they well, in the sense that they didn't take the threats to them, right? They just said, and at the end of the day, it actually turned out to be a lot of empty promises. Now, it really, really didn't feel that way in the time, because we were getting threatened, and our suppliers were getting threatened. But at the end of it, it kind of just cooled down because they realized they weren't not going to work with them, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of, I guess, in some sense, called the bluff. There's not much escalated. There are things that happen, like every time we go to the media and talk about how difficult the industry is, typically something happens right after. There's like a pretty clear correlation between when the pushback comes, it's typically right after some kind of an article comes out or something. But to be honest, I also think Corona has been difficult for everyone in the industry. So at some point, people probably just started focusing so much on surviving that they had less time to bother us.
Yeah. But honestly, I'm a bit shocked, because I would say that there's some sort of fair play in any industry, and the way that this collegiality, if you may call it like that,
Yeah.
because you are disrupting, of course, a very old school,
Yeah.
just to call it like that, industry, and it has established players and so on. But why is that wrong in the big picture when you're doing so much, you're improving so much for the fishermen, right? And of course there's this debate with like, yeah, but it's not economically viable for the companies. It's of course we have established supply chains, so why disrupt that? Okay, but then focus on your business, then trying to push back on somebody who's doing this for the right reasons. And I'm just I saw the article, I think you shared it maybe a month ago or something like that, and you've mentioned something about the threats, and I was like, I will want to ask you, because I feel maybe not to the same extent of getting threats, but you might get pushback as an entrepreneur from people even in your network. And having this mentality of like, I need to keep going because if I don't do it, nobody else will do it for me. It's really one of the main themes I want people to take from this interview, that you might get pushbacks, but the important part is to not focus on that, but rather focus on why you're doing your business, why you're there in the first place, how can you move forward from that, because it's not worth your energy, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And is there anything that you've noticed in regards to the schoolgirl, so to call it, mentality in the beginning? Do you have any, I don't know, any advice for young women, for example, that listen and they have ideas and maybe they've shared their ideas with 2-3 people in their network and they got this sort of, come on. What do you advise them? What should they think about when they get this feedback?
I think it's you just need to brush it off your shoulder, and it sounds so tough because it's not always easy, right? If you might feel like a lot of people might not take you seriously. And as late as yesterday, I was called a stupid little girl on a Facebook thread somewhere. Wow. So it happens. But the thing is, you have to have enough self-confidence to know that you're not a stupid little girl and that what you're doing is not a school project. You need to be confident in your own idea. And of course, you can't be confident from day one. But you need to, I think that, to be honest, I think that that kind of an attitude is relatively easy to ignore once you decide to ignore it. And I mean that in the sense that it's kind of black and white kind of wrong, right? Like you say, someone says, oh, you can't do this because, you're young or you're a woman, or because for any of those kind of binary reasons, I would say once you decide that that's silly, then you can just go, okay, well, that person doesn't believe in me, but it doesn't matter because he or she is wrong. I think it gets more difficult when you start getting kind of more gray pushback. Like, how do you say that? Like, pushback that's a bit more discreet, right? Like, so when you start feeling pressured, where people, I think it's harder when people start giving criticism that could be disguised as proper criticism, but actually is pretty condescending and actually made to break you down, right? And I don't even think in many of the cases that people who do kill entrepreneurial spirits mean to do so. I think it's just a kind of repercussions of the way they speak to people who have ideas. And I think you have to kind of be ready to stand up for your idea while listening, of course, to all the feedback that you're getting. And you need to separate yourself from the idea. And especially when it comes to like personal things, like it's like being a girl or being young or whatever it might be, or being from out of an industry or not having a tech background or not having an education enough, like all of these things are personal attacks. And I think if you think of yourself as a different entity than your project, then it becomes easier to step into that position of like, now I'm talking on behalf of the company. This is what the company believes. And if someone attacks you in that character, that's different from attacking you as a human.
Yeah.
And being able to take that distance and considering, then you as Nima can sit at home and be like, oh, poor Nima Blue Lobster, like that comment really sucked. But I don't feel it on me because it's that person doesn't know who I am as a human. So it can't become personal. It's purely a professional dig, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of separation between you and your project, as passionate as you might be about it, it's important to have that distance.
Like, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Don't to a certain extent, don't identify yourself with the project idea
Right.
or the business, because
Right.
they're two separate entities, like you said.
Exactly.
That's a piece of feedback that I mean, a lot of the listeners and viewers know that it has been shared before. And Anya Monrad, that we both admire very much here in Denmark, she shared that, no matter the situation that you're in, don't take this as a personal personal offense, because it will impact the way you react to that situation, and it's really not worth your energy and time in some instances.
Exactly.
I want to ask about, related to this, about your support system, because to me, the fact that you are confident and that you are able to distance yourself from the business is something that I don't see often. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I know that I have friends, or I have people in my network that they don't feel at all good about getting some sort of feedback that is not the one that they expected, myself included sometimes. And it's very hard at times to be able to make this differentiation. And I think having support systems is key. How do you find your support system, and is there anything that you recommend in terms of mentors, supporters, and so on, for those of our listeners?
I think it's a super, super good question, and something that probably is not spoken about enough is the support system, right? Because I would not be here today if I didn't have a fantastic support system of people. And because it can be lonely, it can be frustrating. It takes a huge personal toll on you to be under as much pressure as you are when you're starting a company. There's no doubt about that. And you can do the work-life balance as well as you want, but you need other humans to be supporting you. Or at least it makes the journey just so much easier. I remember being at a workshop, and I just cannot remember all of the points, but they basically made us write out different characters that we had in our life. And it was like a cheerleader, a critic, someone like who would like give you honest criticism, a cheerleader that is the first one, like someone who just kind of be nice to you and tell you you're awesome. Your I don't remember them. Your kind of free range, now we're going to go crazy kind of like there was like 6 different ones, and I just can't remember them, but maybe we can Google it afterwards. But I remember sitting down and looking at that, feeling like who are my different people, who's my safe space, who's my critic, who's my professional critic, and making a point that they shouldn't be the same person, and we can't expect that much from everyone, that there's someone I can sit down with and they will give me a lot of honest critique of my project, and of me as well, of like, how am I actually, now going to Nima, like how am I as a human performing in this role, and that person doesn't necessarily need to be the same person that cheers me up and that makes me feel good about myself, but I do need both, right? I need both to be able to grow, and I need both to stay sane. So kind of trying to identify who those humans are in your network, and then honestly just filling them in if you don't, because I realized, like, okay, on a very personal note, I realized that my cheerleader had always been my grandmother, and she'd passed away a couple of years ago. So I was like, oh God, I actually have this gap in my support system. So I need to find someone who's willing to just be my cheerleader, who just will unconditionally be there for me and be my person like that, you know? So then I went and found someone. Right. And with mentoring, I think it's super important. I think finding people that you can just go for coffee with, who are not necessarily invested in your business in any way, but can have that distance, and people who have more experience than you, and by all means just go reach out to them, because most people, if you ask, can I go for a coffee, you take that initiative, like write on LinkedIn or something, or some, an email, people typically say yes, right? Like people want to, lots of successful, experienced people want to help out the new generation, and mentoring is such a vague term, because I believe it's not about setting up like, we're going to meet every 3 weeks and you're going to give me feedback on these points. That some people work like that, and then that's perfectly fine. But it can be something as informal as just like, I just need to vent and hear your thoughts on it from a professional perspective, as someone who's been through a similar journey. And it's often just about chemistry. You meet with someone and then you think, God, I want to spend more time with you. You make me feel like I can do this. Right.
Yeah. Wow, that's super wise. I think I will definitely look up those 6 roles that you said in your support system, because I feel like we can use that as an exercise for those that listen to this interview and then they want to do the work. Okay, I missed that. I have an idea. I've been working for years or months or who knows what on my business. but I don't feel really connected with the support system. So let's go through that and start looking for those people. And like you said, contact on LinkedIn people that you think might be your support system or could fit a role that will just help you for a while. Because I think also sometimes we feel that somebody needs to be invested in our idea or in our project for a very long time. Like if you say yes now, you need to be here 5 years from now. And the truth is that things have changed and people change and the way we grow is different. I remember having a very important person in my life while I was in university as a mentor, and he really gave me very good advice about the startup world and, you know, agile and all of the ideas of how to create innovation with a small group of people. And now I work in this setup, and I always think that if I wouldn't have met him to have this sort of interactions, I wouldn't know about it because I didn't have those people in my life that know those ideas to share them further. And it impacted me moving to Denmark to study at Copenhagen Business School. It impacted the way I interact with people because he was a very sales-oriented person with just very good, you know, vibe and energy to really connect with people and sell their ideas and be like, look, try this out. This will really be beneficial for you. Let's just try it out. And I was like, well, that's a cool way of putting your idea forward, but not in a pushy way, just the fact that, hey, you don't lose anything if you try this. Like really think about it like that. And when I started applying it in my life, it really changed things. Like people were like, okay, this sounds this sounds great, let's do it. Nima wrote me after we discussed to meet that why don't we meet in person, and I was like, well, I have not even considered that. And we are living in the same city, so there we are. It's really fun. It's really great to hear this advice and also more about the challenges and your journey, because I want people that listen to really think about how can they apply this in their life. Do you have a business? Do you have an idea? Do you have some understanding of how your current setup or role can progress? Start looking for those connecting dots and ask people about their opinion. Ask open-ended questions. Go find your support system and so on. I want to continue a bit by talking about measurements. Because you did mention some super nice updates from the path of Blue Lobster. So Blue Lobster now has how many employees, you said?
We're 9.
We're 9. Okay, you're 9. And that means that in the beginning, it was you and your co-founder, Christine, right?
That's right.
And you said a year it took until it took off, or you had something to share, right? An app. What happened after that year? And when you said that you had a very good feedback from the market and that you got very fast clients, restaurants. How did that happen? How did you measure that? Did you have milestones in mind, or were you like, let's see what happens once we do this?
So I think when I look back at like especially the early stage, basically Chris and I we started off, and we just the first thing is that you start off slow, right? We started off meeting every Wednesday for a few hours, right? That was kind of our working day, and then we just said, we're going to go to start talking to people. And if people think that's a good idea in three months, then we continue. Otherwise, we kill it. And we had these really harsh, and actually, when I think back, they were all externally driven in some sense. They all required an external, they all required like an external verification somehow, a validation. So we would say, okay, if no one has shown any interest and people think, no, we haven't found anyone who thinks it's a good idea, we kill it in 3 months, done. And then that was a fun project, and when it's over. And then after 3 months, people thought it was super interesting. We started like getting a proper idea together. We had an idea. Okay, we'll go on in 3 more months, and we're going to go to like some startup competitions. We're going to start trying to build something more. Like we're going to do a prototype, and if people still think it's a good idea, then we keep going. Otherwise, we kill it, right? And then that was kind of the thing. So it never felt. When you start a company, I think it can feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going on this huge journey. But in the beginning, it's just this small step of saying like, can we get to the next 3 months and show that there's interest? That's the project. Like the project isn't building a multi-billion-dollar company from day one, right? Like for us, it helps to make it do like really bite-sized and be willing to walk away after. If we didn't find the validation we needed, then be like agreed and clear on the fact that we would just walk away from it, or start from scratch. I suppose. I guess people do big pivots then and say, okay, we're doing something completely different. So we had those. We just had kind of one milestone in the beginning, especially when we're going through the creation phase, right? The milestone was simply to have people continue. It was a good idea. Then it was like in half a year we needed customers. We need someone who's willing to pay for it. And then when we got that, we're like, great. So we continue. And practically what we did in the beginning was we were going through all these idea phases. We started winning startup competitions and stuff. So there was like loads of validation that someone thought it was a good idea, but we didn't have customers yet. So I was about to finish my master's degree, and Chris was back in South Carolina, and she was moving back again. And we realized we couldn't both go full time. So we didn't know what to do because we didn't have customers yet. And so I took a full-time job, actually. And it was a really difficult situation because we stood and had what we thought was a lot of validation, but we weren't far enough with the product yet. So I took a job at the UN, and we were like, this is the agreement. She's going to spend this year, that was 2019, trying to get customers.
Wow.
So yeah, so I worked full-time, spend afternoons and evenings working on the projects,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
All that stuff. And she ran the company for 2019. Like she got it off the ground, and I paid for our rent and food and all that stuff to make sure that we could live off it, or that we could live in general. And then at the end of the year, we had customers. We had, I think, we were working B2B, so I think we had maybe 25, 30 restaurants who was buying from us by the end of the year. And we had we had a logistics system set up, and we had an app, and we had all the things that we were supposed to have. So then I quit my position at the end of 2019, and we she took over as head of product because she was really, really good at, we didn't realize that before as well. None of us have tech backgrounds. We realized when we looked at it, she was actually quite good at figuring out how to develop technology and the product part, like what do you prioritize and things. And then I took over the daily logistics and running the company in like the very practical sense. And so we both went full-time in December 2019, and we actually raised a round at that point, and investment round, and that closed in February. And then we sat down with our first board meeting and decided restaurants only. Forget the canteens, forget potentially private consumers. We're going to make the commitment only restaurants. We closed down anything else, went for restaurants. And within 3 weeks, COVID hit and all the restaurants closed down. Yeah. So that was some journey. But anyway, then we spent the rest of 2020.
So you basically, when that happened, you decided to pivot and focus on, okay, we cannot really do the restaurants as a target audience anymore. We're going to move into thinking how to go private as well. Yeah. How was that process of a few months where you had to change your ideas?
Oh, it was bonkers. So COVID hit, and we quickly realized we should. So this was the first lockdown. This was in March 2020. And we're like, we should do private consumer. It's the only thing that makes sense, right? So within 7 days, I think we launched a web store with fish, and like we had all the marketing stuff out and ready. We bought packaged, everything was there. So we basically launched really, really quickly, and we started operating. And there was demand, and it was fine. And then we realized it wasn't a good business model, actually, because it didn't play off our strengths. We had to sell a ridiculous amount of fish individually for it to make sense. And for that time in our company, we weren't leveraging any of the technology that we had. So we were spending all our time running like a B2C platform when we were building a B2B platform. So actually we had nice first, we had customers and everything. And then after 3 weeks, we closed it down. And we were still in a lockdown, but that was purely a strategic decision, because we decided, and actually it's one of the things I'm most proud of, is closing it down again, because that can be so difficult.
Yeah.
And it was difficult. It was like disappointing these people we came out and launched to, and then say, actually, we're closing it back down, because we needed to focus on building the product that was good for restaurants, because we still believe that that's where the business was. The amount of fish, you have 10 customers that buy the same as one small restaurant, right? And we as a company weren't ready for both. So we'd have to decide one or the other. And we went full in, like nurturing the customers that we did have, creating communities, and then really just narrowing down on product development, software development. We were also a smaller team back then. So that's just what we did. We just built and nurtured the customers. And then when we launched again in June, when the lockdown ended in June, the customers came back, and we jumped, it jumped. And then over the next 5 months, we actually quadrupled our sales figures just with restaurants and canteens. And that was despite restrictions and lockdowns. Honestly, it was chaos. Like our basket size dropped by 42%, which meant that the fact that we were still growing meant that we were out winning like so many new customers all the time, because for every new restriction that came, the basket size dropped even further, and then we would have to win that many more customers in order to not just sustain growth but grow. So we quadrupled sales over 5-6 months, and then in December, when the lockdown happened again, that's when we pivoted, because we basically locked down and we thought we'd grown the company now. We were more people, but also our platform could actually now handle private consumers to use the app. So we had a moment where we thought, okay, we're more ready for it this time. We have our team is different. We have we just have our company grows a lot over 9 months, right? When you're in our size. We thought, we don't know how long this lockdown is going to happen. The government wasn't coming with any kind of clear messages at all about it. So we were like, this could last a week, it could last 2 weeks, or it could last, now it lasts like almost 4 months, more than 4 months. So I think that was the right decision then. And that just shows that the right decision, like, it's not always the right decision to pivot, but it's the right decision to that if we try to pivot, and as we did in the first time, and it didn't work out and the numbers weren't there, then we were also relatively quick to kill it, right?
That's super cool that you mentioned, because I think sometimes people fear that it's a failure to kill something that you've worked on, because how do I know it's the right time? But how do you know that you, by not killing it, you're not really you're basically not really helping the growth of the technology, like you've mentioned, that you've actually built, because you couldn't leverage it. Wow, that's super useful. I mean, I'm so happy you went into the use case, because it really shows that some of those decisions are not easy, but it also shows that you need 3 weeks to change your mind, try something else, and then maybe in 2 months you would have noticed, okay, maybe we need the private consumers, or maybe, but no, you've actually seen that there is need for the B2B, even after during and after the lockdown. So you will be able to leverage that private part, at the private consumers part, at a later stage. Awesome. I love it. Tell me a bit about, what advice do you have for those of our listeners that are considering building a team with a co-founder? Because you have this use case, and you've just shared a bit about how Christina took over the basically the task of running the company for a year, more or less alone, I guess. And how do you make that happen with somebody that you maybe don't know well, or maybe you do know well, but it's a business setup? Do you have any advice?
It's like finding a co-founder is like finding a partner, right? Like a romantic partner. And when people say it's like you go into marriage, it's literally like that, right? And I think there's nothing more important than making it work with your co-founder. And I think a lot of businesses fail because you don't have a good relationship in the co-founding team. I think Chris and I were friends first, so in some sense it helped. In some sense it probably made it more difficult as well. But what I would recommend is finding someone that, of course, you need to be able to be completely honest. The quicker you can lay some ground rules for how you're going to do this, the better, right? So you need to understand how do I communicate? How do you communicate? How do we criticize each other? Because if you stop criticizing each other, then you can't grow the business. And as I said, it's that not taking it personally, for example, that's so true as well in the co-founding team, that you need to have distance from critiquing someone's work versus critiquing them as a human. I think you need kind of a trial period with anyone if you don't know them. I would say, like, you need to have an agreement predefined almost to say, we're going to, again, let's try this for 3 months. We're going to go into this, and in 3 months we have a time set. Like, don't make it fluffy. Like, put a booking in your calendar and say, in 3 months we're going to sit down, we're going to have an honest talk about whether we actually think we can
work
function
well together.
Exactly.
And it's super fair.
Right. And because if you've already prearranged you're going to have that talk and have that touch point, it doesn't feel awkward to have to ask for it, right? Because if you and me say, okay, we're going to start a project together, in 3 months we're going to check up, then if one of us isn't happy, it's going to feel a little awkward being like, oh, you know how we said we were going to take a reflection moment. I need to reflect, So put them in, make it standard practice. Find time once your team grows to be alone with your co-founder, because there are things that you guys need to figure out between you that is super, super important for, just because you're coming in as equal parts in some sense. So you need to make sure that both of you are always on the same page. You're running in the same direction. What else? I'd also say obviously the thing about like finding someone who complements you, who's different from you. Like Chris and I are incredibly different, and I think it's so good. Like I'd kill myself if I had to work with myself, because that's and it would also be really unuseful for the company. So it's good to have a difference in the co-founding team. That's
great. I mean, I think it's super nice that you've mentioned a bit more about the understanding of this might not work, just to be fair. If you have an idea, if you find somebody that you like as a partner, co-founder, but you think about it in a year's time and you're like, maybe it's not the right fit, just be honest with each other and not
right.
I love it. You've been very kind with your time. Thank you so much for answering all of the questions, because I really wanted to give our listeners some understanding of how is it really to run a social focused startup. Focus, of course, on change, because it is not easy, but it's also something that can come from trying things out. Like always, try out things, talk with users, and see how you can move forward in batches, in sprints, and however it works. Is there something that you wish you knew 5 years ago, or something that you reflected on and it's kind of like a nice sum up of your experience?
I mean, I probably just I wish that I just knew that it was going to be okay, that it's important for you to have the work-life balance that everyone talks about, because I know for sure that hands down, Chris and I both had an incredibly unhealthy work schedule for a long time. We really, trying to scale a restaurant-based company through a pandemic, it's not easy. And I mean, we probably nearly killed ourselves trying to do it. I don't mean that to be dramatic. I just think we were like putting ourselves under an immense amount of stress. And like, I can obviously, and I remember thinking at the time, like, no, this is what it takes to get through it. Like, this is the grind. This is how we're going to make ourselves deserving when things go well, right? Like, it almost gets a little martyr-like. You put on this, like, no, this is grit, right? Like, and it is grit in some sense, but you also need to take that distance to make better decisions. Right? Like, how quickly you have to think, if you're leading a company, you need to be able to spot bad moves quickly. And are you going to do that if you're not sleeping, or if you're working until like 10, 11 at night, if you're absolutely exhausted all the time? And another tip there is just like to make sure that things that can be automated are prioritized to be automated, and things that can be delegated are delegated, right? And I think you guys had a good comment today about schedules and stuff, how to automate things. But just to say, I totally agree with that sentiment, that it's super important that things that you can get off your plate, you get off your plate. And it's up to you as a founder to build systems that can make you replaceable. And that's always my ambition. It's to say, if I'm in a role right now, I want to make basically a bulletproof bullet point list of a step-to-step guide, a idiot-proof list of like, this is how I do exactly this task. This is exactly how this process should work. And then, hand it over to someone else, because that is building a company. Otherwise, you're just carrying everything yourself. So the more you can build these processes, saying, at 8:00, this happens, at 8:15, this happens, just as an example, or like this event triggers this event, which triggers this event, which triggers that event. Write it down, codify it, make sure that it's at a point where you can hand it over to someone else, and then do that. And then every single time you replace yourself, then you're making a useful company, right? You're building something that that's going to hold and has a strong foundation, because that makes sense.
Wow, that's super wise. I mean, you've accomplished so much. I'm really happy that we get to have this conversation in person, because you've accomplished so much, and you take the time to reflect and learn from maybe what didn't work perfectly, and you feel like, okay, in the future, I do have to move into this space where I have less tasks that are operational.
Right.
And as we grow, I need to be aware of the fact that delegation is super important, because when you start your own startup and it works, it's like your baby.
Right.
It's like, it's very hard to say, no, I'll give you all of this responsibility because I know you can do it. In the beginning, you always are, is this going to work?
Right.
You're doubtful, not that because you don't trust the person, but because you've been working with this yourself so long,
exactly,
that you feel like, oh, but I should still be doing this, right? Like, it's part of my role.
Yeah.
And it's it's not easy. And I hope that those listening are really maybe getting some also tips and tricks for, like, maybe the future. Not necessarily that you need to do this right away, go and make a list and be like, I must accomplish this in 5 months, because otherwise I failed. Because it's really not about that, but it's more about reflecting and about taking this in as, okay, how can I improve, and how can I make the business successful by not taking all of the hard work on my shoulders, but rather sharing that with the team. So nice, so wise. I love it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is gonna be available on YouTube, so you will see us here live on your computers. It was really fun, Nima. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
It was really fun. And we are going to be sharing all of the news online. So follow Nima on LinkedIn and on all of the other platforms, because she's very active, and she posts super cool stuff. So it's really nice to be connected. A lot of fish stuff. Yeah. So if you're into that industry, even more, follow her. And stay tuned for more updates from interviews with female role models. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I hope you felt inspired to take charge of your next career move. Remember to review this podcast and share your comments. Thank you.